Vice President for the mighty Midwest and illustrious Eastern Canada of the company that is hosting this Zoom tonight called Legal Shield. And the whole purpose of this is for us to give you some very powerful information about wills and estate planning. Having a last will and testament is a vital part of your family's plan. And it's something that we know we all have to experience at some point in time, but you never know when it's going to happen. Trust me, as somebody who's just lost both parents, I lost my mom in August of 25, I lost my dad in March of 26. Having estate planning done, a last will and testament, living will, power of attorney, a trust in some situations, is something that your family will thank you for. We often say a will is the love letter for the people that you leave behind. Now, I know many of you may have questions. You might be wondering, is estate planning important? What's a will? What's a trust? What's the difference? I'm not a lawyer. I don't even play one on TV, although from time to time I do play a homicide detective on Chicago PD, the television show. But through what you're going to hear now with one of my very good friends, one of our provider law firms through Legal Shield, he's going to give you some information that's going to cover the grounds and many of the questions that you probably have about estate planning. And then I'll come back and wrap up with some information. So we have a mixture of people that are on this webinar tonight. Some of you are already Legal Shield members. Some of you have never heard of Legal Shield. Whatever, no matter what the case is, this is going to be a very valuable and note-taking worthy presentation. So with no further ado, from our Pennsylvania provider law firm, I would like to introduce you all to Mr. Mike Fiffick, and he will share a little bit about himself and go through the slides. Take it away, Mike.
Thanks, Mel. Hey, my name is Mike Fiffick, and my law firm is Fiffick Law Group, and we have offices in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. And I've been a Legal Shield provider attorney since 1993, believe it or not, many, many moons. And it has been my distinct pleasure to be part of that organization for that long. And I'm going to be talking to you today about estate planning and how we make it easy. Legal Shield makes it easy to protect your family. I've been doing estate planning for many years. I've been recognized recently in Best Lawyers of America for Trust and Estates, and have been quoted in many resources that you're very familiar with, including the New York Times, CNN, and a variety of other online and news organizations. I'm usually joined by my good friend Wayne Hasse from Ohio, but he is otherwise occupied tonight. So it's just me. I'm all you get tonight, and I hope to fill the bill. So tonight we're going to be talking about these things. What does a will do? What happens without a will? And how to start protecting your family. So grab a drink, grab a pen and a pad, and we're going to go ahead and get started. And I hope that you're going to get something out of this presentation. Before I start talking about estate planning, I want to talk to you about something that's near and dear to my heart and really is central to Legal Shield's mission. And it's called the justice gap, and in particular, the civil justice gap. And that gap talks about how 75% of American households have at least one problem of significance every year, legal significance of every year, that can use a legal solution to it. And that's not just one, it's actually 40% of homes have five or more situations that come into their life where a connection to an attorney and legal advice can really be a huge help for them. So it's not really a question of if you're going to have a problem where connected to a lawyer is helpful. It's a matter of when, right? It's really a matter of when. These are problems that are very common in people's lives, and they're real bread and butter types of things. We talk to folks about money type related issues, government benefits, debt collection, whether somebody should file bankruptcy, rental problems, eviction, mortgage issues, right? If you've ever been a tenant in a building, perhaps you've had a problem with your landlord that you wish you had a connection to a lawyer, but you didn't know exactly where to turn for that, or was afraid to call a lawyer because you thought it was going to be very expensive. Employment related matters are also very common. Maybe you feel like you're getting stiffed and you've had unpaid wages, you're not being paid correctly, or you're a victim of workplace harassment or abuse and you don't know exactly where to turn. Relationship breakdowns are a reality for many families, whether it's marriages in transition, child custody and support disputes, and domestic abuse. These are things, very sadly, that come into many households here in America. And folks that are dealing with those problems oftentimes either don't know where to turn or they are afraid to make a call because they think that it's going to be super expensive. And then finally, we have insurance disputes, legal status, right? Insurance companies love to deny claims and they are just daring you to challenge them because they figure that probably in 90% of the time you're not going to challenge them. And where do you turn for that? I often say that when you drive down the highway, if you have an auto accident, you're going to see lots of billboards or lawyers who would love to talk to you if you've been hit by a tractor trailer. But if your boss is harassing you, if your landlord is coming into your apartment unannounced, maybe when you're not there, if you have been shorted on your pay, where do you turn? Where's the billboard that says, please call me? I would love to talk to you about this. They don't exist. They don't exist. And so a lot of folks don't know where to turn for problems like that. So Legal Shield is really the solution to a lot of those problems. When you don't know where to turn and you're afraid that it's going to be expensive, Legal Shield takes the transaction out of the equation, right? Because that's what you're thinking about if you're calling a lawyer. What's it going to cost? It's going to be super expensive. Maybe I don't call because of that. I don't even know who to call. Legal Shield answers all the questions. Legal Shield members of that community, know exactly who to call, and they also know that it isn't going to cost them a dime whenever they call their provider law firm to get help and advice about whatever it is that's going on in their life. The transaction's gone, and we're just talking about transforming whatever that problem is into something that's better and hopefully into a solution altogether. So let's switch gears here for a minute, and we're going to talk about estate planning. And estate planning for lots of folks might seem difficult, fancy, highfalutin. I don't know, whatever it is. It's a big phrase, but let's just boil it down to what it's really all about. It's about taking care of your family. That's really what it's all about. And if I had the technical ability to send a poll out to all of you and I asked you this question, what's the most important to you in life? I can guarantee you that 99% of you would answer that your family is the most important thing to you. And the problem with that answer in estate planning is that what we say, meaning our family is super important to us, is oftentimes different than what we do because so many of us don't take the time to take care of our family by getting our estate plan done. 2 out of 3 Americans don't have their estate planning together. They don't have a will or a trust. And that statistic has been the same for many, many years. And we're here to try to help solve that. We want to turn that upside down and make it so that 2 out of 3 Americans do have their estate planning done, do have taken care of their family. I hear a lot of reasons why people don't take the time to take care of their family with estate planning. And here are some, I think, common myths that feed into why people don't get this taken care of. And some folks believe, well, I only need a plan if I have money. And that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, the more modest your estate, the more important it is to get a plan in place because it is very costly to fix the problem of not having an estate plan after you've passed away. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Some folks might just assume that their spouse is going to get everything anyway. And let me just say that that's not necessarily the case. Your spouse may end up splitting your estate with your kids, and that can be particularly difficult in some situations that we're going to talk about later. Or maybe you're thinking, or your friends and family and neighbors are thinking, I don't have the money to pay a lawyer to get this done. And hey, that's real, especially in this time when affordability is a challenge for Americans more than it's ever been before. But guess what? Legal Shield takes that issue out of the way and we make it affordable because getting an estate plan for your family is something that's covered by our membership. So here's 5 reasons why I suggest that you prioritize your estate planning, and maybe you can share these with your friends and family. So number 1, not knowing the law, right? You might think that you know what the law is, but you probably don't. And case in point, I'll tell you about a grandma that I represented some time ago that didn't have her estate plan together, but she did have a plan, and that plan was that she had little life insurance policies and named her each of her grandkids as beneficiaries of those policies, and she thought that that was perfectly fine. Well, what grandma didn't know was that her grandkids who were under age 18 when she died could not receive the money from those policies because in most states people under the age of 18 cannot inherit money. And so we had to go through an expensive and time consuming court procedure to have guardians appointed to receive the money out of those life insurance policies. Grandma didn't know that, right? She thought that she knew what the law was, but she didn't. And it was a very costly mistake ultimately for her family. I've mentioned briefly, but whenever you don't have a plan, it's expensive to fix the problem. And the price of the fix is almost always more than the cost of the plan. I'll tell you another story about a mom who had five kids and she owned two properties, her house, and then she had a rental property. No plan in place. Well, without a plan, right, you don't get to pick who is going to handle your estate. And the law says that all of your kids have the equal right to manage your estate. But in order for the estate to be open, they all have to agree on who's going to do it. Well, unfortunately for this mom's family, they couldn't agree on what day of the week it was. And so, guess what? They never could agree on who would step up to manage mom's estate. And a couple of years after mom passed away, her estate still wasn't opened and her houses still weren't administered, and nobody had access to the value that mom had worked hard to save her entire life to pass on to them. We were going to have to go through a very expensive court proceeding again to fight over which of those kids was going to get the nod to be able to administer the estate. That's just not something that has to happen whenever you take the time to put a plan in place. Now, if your family isn't that important enough for you to get your plan done, just think about yourself because estate planning isn't all about what happens after you die. It's also about what happens whenever you're alive. And you want to get stuff in place before you would have some type of a unexpected health problem. I'm having that situation right now. Got called by a husband whose wife had a seizure, drove off the road, one car accident, head injury, and now she's in a coma. And no estate plan in place, no power of attorney in place. And now we're going to have to go through a very expensive guardianship proceeding to have the husband appointed as the guardian for the spouse. That's going to probably cost them about 5 grand in order to get that done. You know what? An estate plan for members of our Legal Show community costs nothing more than the cost of their annual membership. Makes sense. Get it done. We make it easy. You want to preserve and protect what you have saved. Your family is vulnerable to a wide variety of risks in this life. Divorce, judgment, creditors, scammers, right? People who want to take advantage of them. I hope that addiction problems don't come into the members of your family's lives. All of these things are risks that your family is vulnerable to. If you don't have a plan and your hard-earned wealth goes to your kids without any type of protection from these risks, then all of your hard-earned savings could be lost to any one of these risks. But that doesn't have to happen if you have a plan put in place for yourself. You've worked really hard. The last thing that you want to do is lose it to some predictable risk that comes in life. Doesn't have to happen. And then finally, if for no other reason, think about what you want your legacy to be to your family. Do you want it to be a no plan legacy, which means chaos, stress, and anxiety? Or do you want your legacy to be a planned legacy of thoughtfulness and planned and easy transition to make things easier on your family? We want it to be the latter, of course. Now, if you don't have a plan, or if you know somebody that doesn't have a plan in your life, here you can make them feel better and say, hey, guess what? The government has a will for you, and it's called the law of intestate succession. Now, should you rely on the government's plan for your family? If you said yes, I think that you may need to have your head checked because nobody should rely on the government's plan to take care of their family better than how you could take care of your family. Why? Because trust in government is at an all-time low. When I prepared this presentation a couple of years ago, I thought it was low then. It's even lower now. In addition, the government's will was probably written sometime in the 1800s. And that is based upon a definition of the family that is a whole lot different than the definition of the family that we have these days. And here are some things that didn't exist when the government's will was written, probably in your state, like grandparents as primary caregivers, in vitro fertilization, unmarried couples, same sex marriage. None of these were a reality. Nobody thought that a family included any of these things in the 1800s, but it's very common today. And so the government's will is probably not going to reflect the reality of your family in the whatever way it is constructed. So let's switch gears here and talk about what happens to your family whenever you don't have an estate plan of your own choosing. And I like to call these no will nightmare situations. And here's what happens whenever you don't have a plan for your family. And I think knowing what happens is a really great encouragement to you to get your estate planning done. And you can share these with your friends, family, customers along the way. So, first situation, blended families, not unusual at all. We're talking about situations where children from prior relationships are brought into the new relationship. This is a very normal situation in this day and age. Well, the government's will is probably going to require that your surviving spouse splits your estate with your children. And the division of that money depends on whether they're children of your relationship with your current spouse or if the children are from a prior relationship. It's going to be a different split. That can be a pretty tough situation if the primary asset in your estate is a house titled to you and you die. Your spouse is going to have to sell that house in order to satisfy the split of the estate that goes to the kids. That could be a ruinous type situation for your family. If you don't have a plan, who's going to be the guardian for the assets left to kids under age 18? These are realities in this day and age with blended families. Second marriages, related situation, right? Everybody wants to make sure that their blood related kids are guaranteed to receive an inheritance from them. But you get married that second time, and you want to also make sure that your spouse is taken care of. So, do you leave everything to your new spouse and hope for the best that they are going to do the right thing and leave something to your kids? I think that your spouse probably intends to do that. But if you die, maybe they get remarried. Maybe they aren't making their own decisions because of a cognitive or health type situation where they can't make those decisions and their kid steps in to change the plan, disinheriting the money that you would have intended to go to your own blood relation kids. You have to have an estate plan in place in order to guarantee that your children are going to inherit from you, especially in a second marriage type situation. How about unmarried couples? I've got a story about this. A very good friend of mine, never been married, got engaged to another friend of mine who was a divorcee, and they were in their 50s and getting ready to get married. Well, 2 months before Paul was ready to engage to be married, 2 months before their marriage, the date that they were going to get married, Paul dropped dead. And unfortunately for him, he didn't have a plan in place to take care of his fiancee, who I am sure he would wanted to have taken care of. Well, Paul's very elderly mother inherited his entire estate to the detriment of his fiancee. The government's will does not make a provision for your fiance, doesn't make a provision for your boyfriend or girlfriend. Doesn't matter if you've been living together for 20 years. There's no common law marriage in most states anymore these days. That person is not going to inherit under the government's will. And that's especially difficult if the two of you have been living together in a house titled to your name and then you die and you've never put that person's name on the deed and you have no plan in place. They're going to have to move out or buy that house from your estate. And if you're unmarried and you're living in a home together and you've got no plan in place ahead of time and you break up, how do you divide everything? How do you divide the house? You know, the law of partition is the government's breakup plan for people who are unmarried. And guess what? It's a bad plan. It means that it's almost a guarantee that you're going to be in court fighting over who gets the real estate, who stays, who moves out, who pays the mortgage and bills, and how each of you get paid back for the money that you invested in the property after you passed away, or after you passed away, or after you broke up. Who's in charge, right? This is another very difficult thing that happens whenever you don't have a plan in place. You know, whenever you have your own plan, you get to pick a person who's going to manage your estate after you're gone. That person is called an executor or an administrator of your estate. It's somebody that you trust that's going to carry out your plan. You get to choose that. Well, when you waive your right to have your own plan, the government's plan uh, has its own choice. And it might be a set of people who can't agree, like the mom that I talked to you about before. And in that situation, if you're familiar with the HBO series Game of Thrones, it really kind of sets up a Game of Thrones type of a situation where all of your kids might end up fighting over who gets to manage your estate. And all that results from that in the most of the situations, and I've been doing this for 32 years, right? Most families don't get along. I hate to say that, but they don't. And so it ends up in delays, fights, chaos, and unnecessary expense. Single parents, if you don't remember anything from this presentation other than this section, then I would consider this to be a success. But if you are a single parent and you've got children under age 18, you know, if you go to work tomorrow and you never come back, here are some things that I'd ask you to think about. What happens to your kids? Who's going to take care of them? Who manages the money that you have left for them? You know, if you're divorced or there's going to be another parent there, would you want to take the chance that your ex ends up managing the money or maybe even your kids after you're gone? You know, who's going to put them to bed, help them with their homework, take them to soccer practice, make sure that they get on the bus to go to school? Wow, this is an important set of things that you have the ability to put in place with an estate plan that if you don't and you waive this right, you're really making your little kids vulnerable to expensive court proceedings and maybe somebody stepping up to the plate who would be the last person that you would pick to do any of these things on behalf of your kids. And in particular, why would you let some judge who you don't know, who doesn't know you, doesn't know your values, make decisions about your kids? It doesn't have to be that way. So let's talk a little bit now about what a will does. Okay, and there's some basics. A will directs the distribution and handling of your assets. Who gets what, when, and in what proportions. That's what a will does. You also get to appoint somebody that you trust to manage your estate. That person's called the executor. You can appoint a person to care for your minor children. That means live with them, put them to bed, make sure they get fed, take them to soccer practice, all of those types of things. You also can place age restrictions on your beneficiary's ability to have access to the inheritance that you're leaving to them. The law default would say they get it at 18. Does anybody think an 18-year-old is responsible enough to manage a significant inheritance if they were to get it? Probably not. At least that's been my experience anyway. I could probably count on one hand the number of wills I've done where parents think that it's okay that their kids can inherit at age 18. They oftentimes will defer it until at the very earliest 21. You can also make gifts to non-family members, other people that are important in your life, like your partner, your stepchild, a friend. Maybe there's a charity or a church that you want to make sure gets included in your plan. The government's will doesn't make a provision for any of those things. They're all going to be left out of your plan unless you not waive your right. You want to have a plan of your own. Now, your will doesn't control all of your assets, and I think it's really important for you to understand what a will doesn't control. It isn't going to control assets that have another name on the account, a jointly titled asset, like a bank account with your kid's name on it, or a deed with somebody else's name on it that passes by right of survivorship. Those jointly titled accounts are going to go to the person who survives you after you pass away. Same thing with assets controlled by a beneficiary form. And examples of those include IRAs, 401ks, life insurance, annuities. Hopefully you have filled out a beneficiary form to say where that goes after you pass away. That's not perfect. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And any assets that you have in a trust are going to pass in accordance to the terms of the trust. Now, some folks that I think are maybe too smart by half engage in what I like to call DIY estate planning. They say, hey, I don't need a will. I've already got my plan in place, and I've done this with a variety of things like jointly titled assets, beneficiary forms. And I think that this is going to be A-OK for my plan. Well, I'm here to tell you that there are a lot of problems with that, and you shouldn't feel so comfortable if that's what you're doing. And again, I will remind you, you don't know what you don't know. Like that grandma that thought she had a plan, leaving little insurance policies to her grandkids under age 18. She didn't know that they couldn't inherit that money, and we had to go through an expensive court proceeding to get that money to them, costing a lot of money and making a big delay. So a little mistake like that, something that you don't know, can cost your family thousands of dollars. It might seem like common sense to put somebody else's name on a bank account or a deed so that they get it after you pass away. But a lot of folks lose sight of everything else that comes with doing something like that. Number one, you have to understand that you lose control of that asset whenever you put somebody else's name on it. In addition, whatever problems that person has, like debt problems, creditor problems, divorce, those all can adversely affect the money that's in that account or on that deed. So if you've put your kid's name on the deed to your house and your kid has a judgment entered against them, guess what? It's a lien on your home that you're going to have to deal with, even though that wasn't your debt. If you put a kid's name on your bank account and your kid passes away, you're going to pay inheritance tax on your own money. If your kid's name is on your deed, if you want to get a mortgage on the property, your kid's going to have to agree to sign off on that mortgage. I hope that your relationship with your child stays good, but sometimes it doesn't. If your kid gets divorced, that property might be a marital asset that has to be divided in the divorce. And you could also inadvertently cause your child to pay higher capital gains tax after you pass away whenever they go to sell the house. At least in Pennsylvania and many other states, inheritance tax is far lower than the 15% capital gains tax. And so that would be a big mistake to make, even though you think that you are doing something smart. Now, if you think that your plan is all put together because you have beneficiary form designations in place, well, I see a lot of beneficiary form boo-boos out there, like blank ones, right? Or partially completed, stale dated, leaving money to minors, like the grandma that I talked to you about. And in particular, beneficiary forms are no good for contingency plans. You might put your 3 kids there as the beneficiaries and equal shares. Well, what does the beneficiary form say happens if one of them dies before you do? See if you can answer that question by looking at your beneficiary form. If you can't, you've got a problem, and you really should be talking to your provider or lawyer. Members of the Legal Shield community, all they have to do is pick up the phone and they can get answers to those questions. If you're not a part of the community, you might have a tough time finding answers to that. Families that have children with special needs definitely need to have a plan in place. The last thing that you want to do is leave money to a child who is dependent upon government benefits. Why? Because if they own assets, that will probably make them ineligible for those government benefits. And 2 problems happen. One, they'll have to spend the money down in order to get eligible again. And secondly, they'll have to reapply. And that might be a huge task for them. There's a way to leave money to beneficiaries that have special needs without disqualifying them for benefits. And your provider lawyer can help you with that to make sure that your money is there to enrich their lives without jeopardizing their access to the very important government benefits that they rely upon. And then we've talked about second marriages before. If you have a beneficiary form on your IRA and you name your second spouse as the beneficiary, guess what? They get to make all the decisions about what happens with that money after you're gone. And they can leave it to anyone that they want, including their next spouse, their boyfriend or girlfriend, or their own kids, leaving your own kids out of the mix. That's why beneficiary forms are particularly bad for planning whenever you are in a second marriage and you've got kids of your own that you want to make sure get the money. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits that are available to members of the Legal Shield community when it comes to estate planning. They get a will, a basic non-tax planning will that is very good for the vast majority of Americans that are going to put a plan in place to avoid having to rely upon the government's plan. They're going to get a financial power of attorney to designate someone to manage their financial affairs in the event they become incapacitated during their life, like the unfortunate gal who had a seizure, drove into a telephone pole, and is in a coma now. If she had a power of attorney, her husband would be able to take care of her financial affairs and wouldn't have to call me to go through a very expensive court proceeding to have him appointed as her guardian. You can have a healthcare power of attorney to designate somebody to make medical decisions for you while you are temporarily unable to make those decisions. And then that often is combined with a living will where you get to make choices on the type of healthcare that you would or would not want to have at the end of life. You can do a medical consent authorization. Many states allow you to designate somebody to make medical decisions for your children in a temporary fashion whenever you are unavailable. So maybe you go on vacation, you leave the kids with grandma or grandpa. You want to make sure that grandma or grandpa have this designation in place in the event something happens and they can't get a hold of you because you're on vacation. You want somebody to be there to make medical decisions for your kids. We'll also help you put together a memorandum to leave those special family heirlooms to particular friends and family as you would want. And then we'll also help you put together your beneficiary forms to make sure that they work in conjunction and in concert with your will and your other aspects of your estate plan. So here's the price range for all of those services that I just talked to you about for somebody on the street. If they came in to me to talk to me about that, I would tell them that I'd be charging them somewhere between $750 to $1,500 for a couple to do all of those things that I just told you about, right? And it's probably higher than that in many situations. But the price range for all of those services for members of the Legal Shield community, zero. It's all covered by the cost of your membership plan. It's a tremendous value right then and there. If all you do is get your estate planning done, you've doubled or tripled the value of your investment in the Legal Shield community. And you also get access to a lawyer anytime, any day, 24/7, quite frankly, to ask them all kinds of questions that you've got going on in life to help you with whatever's going on and make better, smarter, more informed decisions. That's not all we do. We do lots of other estate planning type things. We do more advanced wills. Maybe you want to have a trust to hold money for a child that has addiction problems, or you've got a special pet that you want to make sure gets taken care of after you pass away. There are lots of types of permeations in plans that make wills a little bit more complex, and we're happy to work with folks that do those. I think that the provider network for Legal Shield, provider law firm network, does more wills than any other law firm in the entire country. We have a tremendous amount of experience with just about every family situation in life. Very, very experienced, deep bench of work that we've done along the way. We can also prepare standby guardianship for your kids, where you can designate somebody to make all the decisions about your kids in the event some type of calamity happens in your life and you can't take care of your kids for an extended period of time. Again, you don't want family services to have to take them, and you don't want a guardianship proceeding to happen. You can be in control of what happens with your young children if something happens to you. You don't have to leave it up to the courts or judges that you don't know. You can also work with your provider law firm to prepare an asset protection trust, especially if you're concerned about the very high cost of senior care and you want to protect assets so that you become eligible to have long-term care medical assistance, pick up some of that big expense, and protect your assets from estate recovery if you are eligible for those benefits. So we want to help you protect your assets so that you can pass them on to your family. And we also prepare revocable living trusts as well. And those are really, really valuable and useful for folks that want to avoid the cost and delays of probate. Speaking of trusts, I'm just going to take a very, very brief moment to talk to you about what a trust is. And a red wagon is a common metaphor for a trust. And maybe, hopefully, some of you are old enough to have had a red wagon whenever you were a kid. I did. I'm old enough to have had a red wagon. And a trust is like a red wagon, right? A trust is something that you create while you're alive, and you transfer ownership of assets into the trust, just like you put things into your wagon. And that trust allows you to manage the assets that are in the trust while you're alive, in the same way that the things that you put into your wagon, you can manage by dragging them around with you wherever you want to go. So your trust controls the assets that are in the trust in the same way that your wagon controls assets that are in the wagon. And there are a couple of different types of trusts. There is a revocable trust. And a revocable trust means, if you have one, that the grantor, which is you, if you create one, you're in complete control of all of the assets in the trust while you're alive. You're in control of changing the trust as often as you want. You're also the beneficiary while you're alive, meaning you get all the benefits out of the trust if that's what you want. You can change the trust at any time. You can get rid of the trust at any time. But it's there in the event you become incapacitated. It's a very, very effective tool to have your backup trustee step in to manage your assets that are in the trust in the event you become incapacitated, completely avoiding any possibility that you'd have to go to court to have a guardianship appointed, and completely avoiding sometimes the delays and hassles that you get with a power of attorney whenever you present them to a bank. A revocable trust avoids probate, the costs and delays that are associated with that. Now, one thing that it doesn't do, it doesn't provide protection for your assets while you're alive. And that's why you might want to consider an asset protection trust or an irrevocable asset protection trust. And again, when you create this while you're alive, you transfer assets into it while you're alive. And you are in control of those assets while you're alive. You can also choose who benefits and change who benefits. If somebody makes you angry, you can take them out as a beneficiary. You can change other types of provisions in the trust, like the trustees and a variety of other positions in there. It's not completely unchangeable after you create it. There are some things that you can't change with an irrevocable trust, and you can talk to your provider lawyer about those things. But one of the big benefits is that it provides asset protection in the event that you need nursing home care in the future. And it also can provide protection for your kids if you use this type of a thing to protect them from the vulnerabilities, the risks of life, like divorce, like addiction problems, creditor issues, scammers along the way. The money that is in that trust can be bulletproof or bulletproofed from those types of vulnerabilities that can come into their lives. So, if you're a member of the Legal Shield community, here's how you can get things started to get your estate plan done. Number one, you can call your provider law firm. Now, maybe folks don't want to call their provider firm, and you can just go online to fill out a contact form on your provider firm's website. Many of them have that. Legal Shield also has an app that's available to Legal Shield members, and they can use their Legal Shield app 24/7 to get the conversation started, to initiate a request to have somebody call them to talk to them about estate planning. And the same thing is available also on Legal Shield's website portal. It's available 24/7. You don't have to wait to call during business hours to your provider law firm if you don't want to do that. So while you're watching your favorite show on Netflix, you can be filling out a request to get things started. And we don't need all that much information to get the ball rolling. Don't think that you have to have all of the answers ready to go before you get things started, right? Don't make that mistake. Just get things started, even if you don't have answers to all of the questions. And your provider law firm is going to talk to you about those things. And along the way, you're going to come up with some answers to those questions. Here's basically all the information that we need in order to get started: your name, your Legal Shield ID, your contact information, names of your family members, people who you might want to leave your assets to. If you have an idea of who you'd want your executor to be, or your agent, or your trustee, we'd love to know that. If you don't know that yet, or you haven't decided, that's okay. You're going to figure that out somewhere along the way. If you don't know exactly what your plan's going to be, and that's not unusual at all, you can talk to your Legal Shield provider lawyer about that, and you're going to come up with a plan together. And then eventually, we'd like to know a little bit about the assets that you own, because that's going to inform the advice that we give you about exactly what your plan should be. So that's what I have for you this evening. I'm going to hand it back over to my good friends.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mike. I definitely appreciate that. And ladies and gentlemen, it's so interesting to me being in this industry for as long as I've been in here, how many of my friends and people that I've just met over the years have told me, "Oh, when I have a legal situation, I'll just Google it," or now there's AI and I can AI things. And I was speaking with one of our provider attorneys not too long ago, and he talked about how this open source AI is pulling data from all types of places. And in some situations, they're pulling data from laws that aren't even on the books anymore. Things change. So, I understand that a human being with compassion and understanding and the ability to decipher and discern things is a lot more powerful than just running to our phones or running to the internet trying to figure stuff out. So, in my experience, there are a few different reasons why people don't only do estate planning, but they just don't deal with attorneys, period. First and foremost is because of the cost. At $300 to $500 an hour, nobody wants to pick up the phone and ask a question. Well, through Legal Shield, we've removed cost as an issue out of the way. And if you're not a member yet, please get back with the person that invited you on this webinar so they can show you how to enroll in our membership plan. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go over briefly some of the services that we offer for you guys, just so you'll have a better understanding of what it is that we do. But one of the reasons that people traditionally don't seek the advice of an attorney is because of cost. We've become the low cost alternative to high price attorneys in the sense that through the collective buying power of close to 5 million people, now we're not paying the $300 to $500 an hour. We're paying a flat monthly fee through our membership. And again, I'll go over that in a moment. The other thing, though, is knowledge and awareness. I'll cover both of these quickly. Knowledge and awareness. Traditionally, most people don't grow up in households. The overwhelming majority of Americans, or North Americans, if you're in Canada, don't grow up thinking, I'll use my attorney or I need to call my attorney. And why don't we think that? Well, it goes back to cost primarily because lawyers are expensive and you have to pay cash. But we've also been taught that the times that we need attorneys are for very traumatic situations. And yes, estate planning is a big deal, right? We've made it an affordable deal. We've made it an easier deal for you to deal with. Again, it's the love letter for the people that you leave behind. But the other thing is, the real definition of a legal situation is any time you could have used an attorney and the outcome would have been better. That's really what a legal situation is. So, what I'm going to do with you really briefly is share my screen and share some information with you guys that I think will be a little bit helpful, especially for those of you that have never heard of Legal Shield. Our company has been around since 1972. This is not a flash in the pan or a startup company. We are battle tested. We've been here through the test of time. And again, close to 5 million lives protected by our dedicated law firms, our network is why we are here, the collective buying power. I've had times in my life where I didn't have AAA and I had to call for a tow truck to get my keys out of the car, give me some gas, or even get a tow. And when I had AAA, it was far more affordable than me calling a tow truck on my own or a service vehicle on my own. Think about it like that for legal services with our nationwide network of law firms, no matter where you are, having access. All right. And what we want to do is build a better world where access to justice is equal for every human being. We began by accident. The gentleman you see here, Mr. Harlan Stonecipher, was in this accident. It wasn't his fault, and he was sued for it back in the late 1960s. And that's when he realized he needed some type of legal protection, but it didn't exist in America. So, to go a step further, ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you about what we call our preferred legal plan. Now, we do have a basic plan and we have a premium plan. This is our middle of the road plan, and it's one of the most robust plans that I've ever seen. And by the way, we're the only game in town. We are the original legal service provider when it comes to doing this at a rate of membership. People often compare us to other legal companies like, say, a LegalZoom or something like that. We actually give you law firms, not a directory. We give you a provider law firm for you to call. And for $39.95 a month, we're going to protect you, your spouse or significant other, your never married dependent children age 25 living at home, or if they're full time college kids, regardless of where they go to school. If you have a child that is physically or mentally challenged and you are at least 51% financially responsible for them, we'll cover them too. So all of those people can be covered under the same membership. We give you unlimited phone consultation to discuss anything of a personal matter. When you have a phone, you have a firm. No stressing, no guessing. You can tap the app, set an appointment with an attorney that specializes in the area that you need, and get your questions answered. If the next best step on your behalf is a letter or a phone call, now your staff of attorneys writes that letter and makes that phone call for you. My wife, she took me out of town for my birthday. We went to Savannah, Georgia. Her bags got there. My bag never got there. They told us to go out and get what you need for your birthday. I did that. They only wanted to give us about 75% of our money. We wouldn't have bought 100% of it had they not lost my bags. Here's the thing though, we didn't argue with them long term. We called the law firm. They wrote a letter on our behalf, presented the exact same receipts, and in less than 30 days, we got all of our money back. A letter or a phone call from your attorney is more powerful than you arguing yourself. Contracts and documents before you buy a house, buy a car, lease an apartment. We want to see where the bones are buried. So go ahead and get those things reviewed. Again, remember, ladies and gents, the real definition of a legal situation is any time you could have used an attorney and the outcome would have been better. We saved a young woman $2,500 on the purchase of a used vehicle because we had the dealership scratch out the car wash. Yes, the car wash. You might be financing a car right now, or a car wash rather, and don't even know it. If you have an uncontested divorce, adoption, separation, or name change, 180 days after that, you'll be able to get that done at no additional charge. You'll still have to pay your filing fees wherever you live, the state, county, or municipality, but you don't have to worry about paying the legal fees. We've already covered the estate planning in depth. I'm not going to go into that right now, but understand that this is part of your program. He mentioned $1,500 where he is in Pennsylvania. I've heard around $2,000 in the area that I live in. So getting that done already pays for your membership. Again, at $39.95 a month, I'd rather have it and not need it and not have it. When it comes to traffic tickets, right? I believe that we're probably already paying too much for our already too high automobile insurance. And another violation on your record or the record of your children could raise your already too high traffic ticket rates, or insurance rates, rather. So at this point, having an $80 copay or a $79 copay to have an attorney go to court and represent you in a traffic ticket to try to keep the points off of your license, it's invaluable. I've tested this part of the program for you. They've gotten me out of, let me not say gotten me out of, but got the fines reduced or no points on my license in a lot of situations. Online notarizations and e-signatures, we do those for our members as well. If you're sued in a civil suit or have an IRS audit, member or spouse, we're going to give you a bank of hours, give you some representation there. There's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week phone number. If a person is being arrested, questioned, or detained by some type of law enforcement official, it would be great to have access, and we're going to give you that. 24 hours, 7 days a week. Anything that's not covered under our normal scope of work is covered under our 25% discount. I like nice things. I used to shop at Nordstrom's until I found out there was a Nordstrom's rack. Same Ferragamo shoes, a fraction of the cost. If you're going to have something of a serious legal nature, you might as well get a great attorney at a fraction of the cost. And again, get back with the person that invited you. They can show you how to enroll. And you only have to pay your first month in order to get started with our services. Now, there's something else called identity theft. And we recently introduced a product. Well, I can't say recently, it's been some years now, but recently, well, I keep saying recently, but we introduced a product to help cover identity theft, right? Because a lot of people think that it's just financial or it's just about your credit, but there are various forms of identity theft. And that's why we monitor what matters most when it comes to not just your social security number, but bank accounts, credit cards, driver's license. We monitor the dark web where they buy, sell, and trade identities. You wake up every day and check Facebook. We wake up every day and check FaceCrook to see if any of our members' information has been compromised. We give you a virtual private network, a VPN, which puts a blanket of protection around your devices, and malware and ransomware protection through Trend Micro. We also have licensed investigators that you can talk to before, during, and after an event takes place, just to find out what best practices are or what your next step should be. We do privacy checks. This is data scrubbing. I used to get a lot of phone calls from random numbers, and that's cut down significantly since we've introduced privacy check as part of our ID Shield. Not to mention the social media monitoring we can do and the sex offender searches that we can do for our members as well within a 5 mile radius of any address. Ladies and gents, we're in a world where crazy things are happening. You want to know, as Bert and Ernie used to say on Sesame Street, who are the people in your neighborhood? You want to know that, and we're going to show you that with our sex offender search. There's a $3 million fraud protection program, which covers expenses that come out of pocket for you restoring your identity, plus full service restoration, where we do whatever it takes for as long as it takes to restore your identity back to pre-theft status. Our identity theft shield for an individual is only $19.95 a month, and for a family, it's $34.95 per month. So you can get this separate of the of the Legal Shield plan, or in conjunction with the Legal Shield plan. Again, ladies and gents, one of the ways that we find ways to pay for our membership is through Member Perks, a collection of over 400 different retailers that give Legal Shield and ID Shield members a discount. I save on average about $98 per month through Member Perks on average. Sometimes it's more than that, which pays for my membership for my wife and my family because we save through Member Perks. So here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. I'm bringing this to an end. It only takes 3 minutes to enroll. So again, get back with the person that invited you on the line if you're a guest, or if you're a member already, this is a refresher for you, but enroll in the membership. Begin your estate planning. Again, you're only paying your first month, but this is something that I've had for over 20 years now personally. I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So once you have it, you'll think of ways to use it. And when life happens, when you got a phone, you got a firm. So enroll as a member, begin your estate planning, activate your ID Shield. All of those things are going to be important for your quality of life, your peace of mind. And we look forward to serving you as a Legal Shield and an ID Shield member if you're not already one. Get back with the person that invited you all. Have a great day. Take care. But most importantly, take charge.